And fuck. We are recording with Mr. Jim Kunstler and Mr. Tom Luongo, and we don't have Dave with us. I thought I thought Dave would swoop in at the final moment and come shower us with his as somebody once said in the comments, I miss Dave's high pitched whine. And and yeah, I said
I'm
it
gonna
is what
reach
it
out to Dave. I'm gonna
yeah.
reach out to Dave on
Tell him to
X,
just
like Twitter
yeah,
or whatever,
yeah
and
tell
see
him
if
to
he's
tell him
just
to
see if
join.
he's.
There's I feel like Dave could very well he could very well not be responding, and I feel like there's like an equally good chance that Dave somehow locked out of his email. That's just kind of what I feel. But for everybody listening, go in the description, go follow these guys on Twitter, go find their podcast, Gold Goats, Guns, Clusterfuck Nation, all that good shit. Um, so I just, because Dave's not responding and I'm banned from Twitter, I did go to y'all's Twitters yesterday, and that's why I just named the podcast War Bondcast. So yeah, Tom, you kind of jumping in saying like they're selling war bonds, and then yeah, you said the greatest trick the British Empire ever did was convincing the United States they don't still run us, which I
They
love
don't
though.
still run shit, right?
Is that so? Then tie in war bonds.
Well, it's the war bonds are the euro bond, right? What I was talking about in the blog post I put out the other day, in response to a media inquiry from Sputnik, was the big like specter hanging over Europe that's been there for years, and anybody who studies the European Union from a skeptical perspective, like if you're skeptical or if you're anti-EU, you know that their goal is complete fiscal and political integration, along with the erasing of all sovereign borders. That's their goal. That's the purpose of the European Union. It always has been that way. It's the gig. Well, then, what you're always then, if you're one of those people, and I'm one of them, Alexander Mercouris, for example, I used to talk about this over at the Duran, used to talk about this stuff years ago, right? 4 or 5 years ago, we used to talk about this. And we always on the lookout for those moments where they can get more political and or fiscal integration. Now, the political integration is easy, right? Because they just pass like edicts from the European Commission, and they put internal political pressure on the smaller states, get them to knuckle under, use the European Court of Justice and other institutions like that in order to enforce their edicts, even if they're completely tyrannical. It doesn't fucking matter. But the fiscal integration is harder, and that actually requires outside assistance, i.e., it requires the Federal Reserve. Um, but what they really want is to give the European Commission tax and spend authority, just like our Congress has tax and spend authority, right? And we have one central issuer of treasury bonds, and that's the U.S. Treasury Department. We don't have Mississippi and Florida and Iowa issuing treasury bonds, right? So, whereas that's what they have in Europe. And that's why ultimately the ECB, as the central bank, isn't really the steward of the euro, right? It's really at the vicissitudes of the markets and a variety of other things. So they desperately want to um, gain that tax and spend authority. And they did the first round of this after COVID with these so-called sure bonds. And they issued a couple $100 billion of these things. They're all sitting at like 40 cents on the dollar, 60 cents on the dollar at this point. So the people who bought them originally with their massive 0.1% coupons are 40% underwater, or
Jesus.
39.6% underwater. Um, and they really need this. And so why do you think NATO funding or Ukraine funding is so important to them? This is a means by which to issue bonds to militarize Europe, empower the German and French military industrial complex, which has always been part of the plan, to replace the American military industrial complex as the arms dealers in Europe, wrest control of NATO from the United States, and get fiscal integration at the same time by giving the European Commission continued expanded authority over taxing and spending. And
There's one little problem, and I'm sure you're aware of this, is that they can pretend to use those bonds in the service of a supposed Ukraine war effort,
right,
but in fact, they're raising the money to bail out their banks, not
yes,
to support the Ukraine war. That's just a front. It's a hoax.
Of course it is. Of course it is, Jim. I was just trying to. Your point is absolutely well taken, and I agree with it completely. I was just trying to set the background for everybody to understand what the mechanism is and what the political imperatives are. Now,
It's a good thing
digging
I
into
read Tom
the
Luongo.
well, digging into the nitty gritty and the mechanics of this and what they're actually going to do. No, you're absolutely correct. Like the money will go into German banks that are failing because their capital adequate, their cars, the capital adequacy ratios are collapsing because their exposure to U.S. commercial real estate and so many other things. But like this is the big worry for them, and they desperately need to have this money flow through and earmarked, and then raise the money through the bonds, and they can write the contracts and then add the reserves to the banks so they know they're going to get paid and blah 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 blah, and then Siemens gets
This
money
seems
and
to be a setup for a signal failure,
Mhm,
because among other things, they have begun descending into this abyss of deindustrialization.
mhm,
They're not going to have the ability to restart a European armaments industry.
mhm,
So, and this is going to be discovered fairly soon,
Hmm.
as well, if they, if they get this bond issuance going. It's going to be discovered fairly soon that they're diverting the money into the European banks. So it seems to be an extremely short term kind of ruse.
right. No, you're correct in that respect, Jim. But they're not completely deindustrializing. They're just making sure that the German and French businesses don't have any real oligarchic control. I think this is more of a squeeze, this is more like a mafia squeeze play than is anything else. So that in the past in German politics, the German industrialists decided what Germany's domestic policy was going to be.
Hmm.
And I think that what we're seeing now is the pushback to that no, we're going to put the German industrialists, subordinate to the state. I think
Except
that's
the German industrialists have had more than a year to begin offshoring their own industrial production operations,
that is
and
true.
that's already underway. So the whole thing just seems to be a folly to me.
It
Also,
is.
it's hard for me to accept the idea that all of these sovereign nations are going to give up their fiscal independence to the EU. I just don't see it happening. I can see the EU wishing for it to happen, or
Right.
trying to squeeze them and importune them. But at the end of the day, as they say, I don't believe that they're all going to go that way. And if a couple of the biggies don't go that way, even if it's just Italy or Spain or Portugal, they've got a problem. I mean, they had a problem in what is it, 2012, when Greece and Cyprus started to go underwater.
Hmm.
And those are inconsequential countries, and yet they threatened the entire European Union scheme.
Hmm.
How, how do they plan on replacing the U.S. armaments industry? Like that's a lofty that's
Oh
a
yeah,
lofty goal.
I didn't say they were trying
No,
to
no, no,
reach.
no. I think
I did.
Tom
I
did.
said
Yeah,
that.
he
Oh,
said that they want to replace
And
that as.
well, just to follow up on Jim's point, I agree with you, Jim. I do think this is a lofty goal of theirs. I do think that they're um, they're engaging in fanciful thinking. Don't get me wrong. I'm just outlining
Yeah, no,
what their project is. I'm not saying whether it's going to work or not.
sure.
They to Tommy's point. Yeah. Well, I mean, look, the French have a big armaments
Yeah,
industry. They and so do the Germans,
German.
and
They have Rheinmetall.
they don't need to buy Bradleys and M1s
Yeah,
and an M1 Abrams from us. They can buy Leopards. Those tanks may suck, but they can buy them.
yeah.
And like what's important, the other side of this is what we're watching now is a bunch of project managers at play. These people are not in charge. We're doing this on the day that Jacob Rothschild died.
Oh
A couple of
yeah.
months ago, we lost Henry Kissinger, and then we've Brzezinski's gone. This one's gone. That one's gone. All the men who put this thing in
It is
place,
kind
who
of
put this thing,
indicative.
they're all dead now.
Now it's just
But
the trust
everybody who's
fund kids
left are the
coked
project
out.
managers.
Yes.
Well, everybody who's left are the project managers. So they're literally like the whole Agenda 2030 is just one big Gantt chart,
Yeah.
and they're all running Microsoft Project.
Yeah. No, it's
Like that's it. And they're
like,
just like, oh, on this date we're supposed to do this, and on this date we're supposed to do that.
Well,
And
here's another thought. It seems to me that Russia has every incentive to wrap up their Ukraine project
I think
by before May,
no,
or
I
at
think
least
they're
to make
enjoying
it.
this.
Well,
wrap it up.
I
I don't
think
think so. I
I
think they're
think
just going to
Mr.
continue to grind
Putin.
it out.
They just, I think today or last night, they blew
I
up
think
the.
Mr. Putin has every incentive to conclude this thing before May, before the Russian elections.
Or
I-
before
I-
the inauguration, not the elections. The elections are next month, Jim.
The,
The elections are in 3
so?
weeks. The elections are in 3 weeks. The inauguration is on May 7th.
Okay.
Just to give you an idea. But you are correct that Putin. Why do you think he went on with Tucker Carlson at that moment in time, before Munich,
Yeah.
Munich, and all of that stuff? Right. It was clear that he's like, look, this is a project at this point that doesn't benefit anybody. You guys aren't going to beat us, and we're not going to back down.
Well, my point being that let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that Putin has an incentive to, if not completely conclude this adventure or misadventure, at least to bring it much closer to conclusion than it is now, meaning it will be obvious to everybody in the West that the thing is totally lost. Now it's only obvious to maybe like 60% of the people in the West, okay?
Yeah.
And at that point, how does the EU start to justify this war fervor when they're really close to concluding this thing? And I don't think that they're going to be able to demonstrate that Russia wants to invade Western Europe. That's another preposterous fantasy.
But the problem is that they'll create a false. They're so desperate to create a false flag to make this happen.
They'll squeeze China.
We have to go three sigma off the board. So a couple other things I want to point out to everybody. Do you remember last year at the big NATO summit in July, which was supposed to be the big moment where they say, well, Ukraine is going to enter NATO, and this is going to happen, and we're going to cross all of Russia's red lines. And Ben Wallace, the then British Defense Secretary, was supposed to become General Secretary of NATO. And then the Biden administration put the kibosh on that. Now, and Stoltenberg was asked to stay on another year. Oh, by the way, that whole process is now in the news again. So what I've been saying for a long time is that Obama / Biden, that wing of the American Democratic Party or the political system, is absolutely aligned with Davos, what I call Davos, or the old European colonialists, the French and the German axis of the European Union. Why would Biden do that if Biden is a neocon, right? Why would he get rid of Ben Wallace? Well, obviously, because they were setting up that they were going to put somebody else in his place. And after Stoltenberg is gone, well, guess what? Who's on the short list now? Soon to be former Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte, who has zero resume skills, zero resume points for running NATO, but he's absolutely a Davos loyalist through and through in every way. He's still nominally in charge of the caretaker government in the Netherlands because they won't let Geert Wilders form a government. So this is typical extended pretend bullshit from the EU and the Davos crowd, what I like to call Davos. And you can see you can see what's going on here. The setup here is that NATO is being set. They are trying to set up the morph of NATO from being under American control to being under European control. Now, if Donald Trump is elected president, Donald Trump is okay with that, right? But everybody else in the United States is not okay with that because they still want the United States to fight Europe's wars for them and to justify, and they still need the boogeyman of China or Russia or this one or locusts or whatever it is to justify more NATO, because NATO is the prototype for a global police force in their minds.
Yeah.
So it's all still Agenda 30 is still the Gantt. They're still running the Gantt chart, folks. They still think we're gonna do all this. We're gonna turn NATO. We're gonna da, 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 da. It's all gonna then turn the keys to the candy store over to the UN. We're gonna have global government, and we're gonna force it and ram it down
What
everybody's throats.
what is it?
I boggle at the conception of this, but you
Is
can
Yeah.
see it. Like they're
isn't there
literally
a
just reading from the
isn't there like a
script.
theorem or a phenomena and I think NASA coined, they just call it go fever. And it's when it's just like
Mhm.
we're going. And the most notably was the 86 Challenger. And it was just
Right.
even when you have it's almost like a mass formation psychosis type of thing. It's where you just we're just going, we're just going, we're just going. And like that can kind of work in, I don't know, the NFL or maybe even like Delta Force where it's like, fuck it, we're just gonna go. It doesn't work in engineering when it's just like the O-rings burst and it just doesn't matter. It kind of feels like it's go fever. It's just like this has been going on like, hey, this is what my dad told me and my dad's dad and fucking Kissinger told me this back in the 70s and they blew off Kennedy's head and took down the world. Listen, we're going. We're going. And it's just like when the announcer's like, the holy shit, oh, they're going for it. They're going for it on fourth down. It's like we're all kind of watching this like, what? They're going for it? And disease X?
It's fourth and
What?
9. What are you
What
doing?
are you doing? And it's just like they're going for it, but like you got to go out and play defense. You're like, what the fuck? And it's just like, you're like, what? They're fucking dropping Epstein names and having UFO hearings, and the whole thing is you're just like,
Focus.
they're going
Russian
for it.
space weapons,
Yeah,
locusts.
they're going for it. You're like, okay, all right. I
Well,
mean,
as I
okay.
wrote in my blog this morning,
Mm,
and it's Monday, February
26th.
26th. I think we're close to the magic moment when people realize that this is all completely ridiculous. A substantial majority understands that this is all insane, and they're going to stop. And it's going to be like the Thermidorian reaction to the French Revolution, to the Jacobin phase of the French
Well,
Revolution,
Tom talked about last time,
which we're
thermite.
in now. You know,
Yeah,
we're in kind of the terminal phase of our Jacobin
I think
uh, revolution.
I think you probably have. This is what I've often thought is you probably have a group, a come up group that aren't the trust fund kids of the Kissingers and the Brzezinskis and the, whatever, who they're fucking it up. They're fumbling it, right? All the founders are dying at 99 and shit. And it's just like they don't have the same chutzpah to, set up the CIA or whatever. And you probably have another group that is no better than them, but they're smart. They're psychopaths, but they're smart and they'll play it off as better. But I think they're looking at all this too and being like, the time is ripe for like a new establishment to come in. They're going to be just as bad as the old guys. But I
mhm.
think they're probably looking at this and they're like, let them keep fucking up. Very quickly there's going to be the moment everyone realizes it's ridiculous, and that is when they're going to be primed for, decades go by where nothing happens, and then weeks go by where decades happen. There's
Yeah,
probably a group.
I'm not convinced that they're necessarily going to be worse than the old guys.
No, maybe not. That's why we'll accept it. It's because they
Yeah.
will come across as better, just as much as they need. It's going to be the free market. They're going to come in just as low as they need to.
Well, it'll depend on the particulars. Like, if they actually manage to get a grip on border control, I think the American people would be very pleased, very grateful if some authorities would do that, would take matters
I,
in
leg- I,
hands and do that.
I legitimately think that that's coming, and I've said it before. Like I don't like it.
Yeah.
It's like the couple breaks up and they get back together, and you're like, yeah, but they're kind of fucked after that first one. It will spell the inevitably the end of the republic if we have a military intervention. But I think I've said it the last 2 years, at least the last year. I think you're gonna have a group of people that are gonna come in right when it looks really bad. And yeah, you're gonna have the southern border. You're gonna have us fighting Europe's wars, and you're gonna have some
And
group that comes in and basically pitches. I guess
this group, would this group be the younger generation of colonels in the
it would be
Pentagon?
military. It'd be military. If they're smart, they'll use a pawn. They'll use they don't actually want to do the overt coup because that never looks good. Um, but I mean, things might be so fucked that they can pitch the whole, you got to give all the power to one guy. He becomes the dictator and he saves the republic and then he hands it back. Like, we have seen that before. You'd have to get bad enough for enough people. We'd have to have what was the last week or so the cell phone services going down, attacks on pharmacies. it'll have to just be that. I was just at the pharmacy, and they're like, the system's down. I was like, that's fine, I can wait. But there was like a woman there who was like, I need my meds, and like she couldn't get it, and then she was like, I'm having like the reaction, and they like called the EMT, and it's like this poor woman's like having it, but it's just like a Monday in like a normal city in the
Yeah.
United States, and it's like, how many millions of times would that have to happen in 1 week before? And then that's just pharmacies. What about anything else? How many in what happens when a fucking car bomb start going off because Hamas members have been coming over the southern border? I don't think you'd have to fuck up American life that
Yeah.
much to have people very quickly be like, yeah, fuck the election.
No, we're at the point. I think
Yeah,
it
yeah, no,
would.
we're
I
there. I
agree.
think
It
we're
wouldn't
on
take
the
a whole
thermite
lot.
reaction. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Gee, and I've said it, like, I don't like it, but you put a gun in my head and a lie detector and say, what do you think is going to happen? I think that's what's going to
Yeah.
happen.
It's
History
kind of
shows.
interesting. It's an interesting moment right now because I don't know about you up in Maine, but here in the in upstate New York and along the whole I think Boston to New York to Washington corridor, we're going to have temperatures in the 50s and 60s this week. And it's going to be like kind of Indian spring as opposed
Mm,
to like Indian summer.
yeah.
And that seems to me to be an interesting opportunity for us to start seeing some interesting street action in the East Coast.
You think you're going to start dialing up that civil
I can
unrest
see I could see
for the
that this would be
elections?
an opportune moment for it to happen. Yeah,
The-
because it's a very unusual, just this warm spell that we're having is really quite unusual,
Mm,
I'm not attributing it to climate change or global warming. Sometimes you just get these things. I've lived through a number of them in my
the
life,
question
but
on the
I think it might provoke people to get out there in the streets and start doing stuff,
it's also an election year, which
and
means
we're coming out
run
of
for it.
this really psychologically punishing winter doldrum period where
Mhm.
especially the opposition to leftist fuckery has been extremely frustrated. I
Yeah.
mean, really, the only bright light in the whole cavalcade of lunacy out there has been the Fannie Willis hearing, and Fannie Willis revealing herself to be the incompetent and grotesque and corrupt character that she actually is,
right.
and provoking people to think that there are a lot more of them out there like that,
Hmm.
including the ones who just tried to put Trump away in New York City.
Yeah.
Including the one that's still running against Trump for president.
Hmm.
Yeah, well, so that's another thing that just that really amazes me that you surf around the cable channels just to see what they're all saying, which I do. Maybe you guys don't do that. I do that. And the idea that on all these networks, even Fox and of course CNBC and CNN, they are pretending that Joe Biden is actually running for president. I mean, they show no skepticism at all that this is so. For them, it's just a settled reality when it is clear to at least 70% of the country that it can't possibly happen. He's not capable of running for president, let alone serving another term. The whole thing is absolutely preposterous. So, you're in a country in which it seems like this tremendous practical joke is being played, this prank that everybody sees through.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
that's another reason why I think the magic moment may be at hand.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, it's. I was gonna ask. You know, they want the war. They have to have the war. Part of me is like they're keeping the southern border open so just obviously because we want at the very least plausible deniability. Just to be like, hey, look,
which war do they want?
The goal is demoralization, Jim. Like
demoralization.
that's the
Yeah.
Yeah.
goal.
Well,
The
they've
goal is
accomplished that.
demoralization, and
They've accomplished that. But
they have in some ways, but they've also you also have to remember. I don't think it matters whether we also know that it doesn't take a majority of people to end an old
Yeah.
system. It
Yeah.
doesn't take more than
Also,
15,
consider
18% of the
this.
people to go, you know what? Fuck a whole lot of this. And then it's over. Like, and then it just stops. And like, so I'm not saying I'm not disagreeing with anything you said, Jim, at all. I do believe that we are very close to some kind of inflection point, for lack of a better term. Um, and but and I do believe that that inflection point is also being supported by other things that are occurring on Capitol Hill, because you can see that stuff. I was just literally, while you guys were talking, and don't normally do this, but I happened to just check the front page at Zero Hedge, and here we are with the New York Times article that the CIA built 12 secret spy bases in
Yeah, I saw
Ukraine
that.
and waged war for the last decade, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
how does this information get out into the public today? This is not
Yeah.
something that the neocons wanted out into
And
the
you're
world.
seeing it. Someone's putting that in front of your eyes.
Someone is dropping, and this is coming out of the New York fucking Times, for Christ's sake, that would normally kill this story.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing a sort of like soft coup, and
Well,
it's
you have to wonder what's going on. What's going on with these people in the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN? I mean, where have they been for the last 7 years? And
Under the
under
thumb
what
of the
kind of a
intelligence
spell?
services.
Under what kind of a spell have they been?
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think they were under the spell of the intelligence services, and I do believe that at a certain level, our intelligence services are not monoliths, and our
yeah,
military is not a monolith, and our political class is not a monolith, and there are people that it's like, you know what, that's enough. You people are fucking traitors, and we're not going along with this anymore. And I
I
just have
thought,
to believe that. Otherwise I have to doubt what I'm seeing is real, and then I have to think, oh, the CIA wanted everybody to know that they got 12 bases and have been waging war against Russia for the last 10 years, and this is the good and proper thing to do for one's country.
yeah,
I think you're right, but it's very hard for me to imagine that there are these, let's call them whistleblower figures out there, or at least counter
Revolutionary forces.
yeah, there are these revolutionary forces in the institutions themselves who have shut themselves up for this whole time, when all of these turpitudes have been put over on the country.
Well,
It's like there should have been 114 other opportunities for them to open their mouth.
there were, but here's the thing: bureaucracies. I was speaking to Larry Johnson about this when I had him on the podcast. And I asked him directly to talk about the mechanisms by which this stuff stays in effect for so long. It's just simply that the bureaucracy itself immunizes itself against good information being passed up the chain. And so everybody goes along to get along for as long as it's on the positive side of
conducive
the
to their
cost-benefit
personal.
analysis
Yeah,
for them.
yeah,
Okay. Once that flips, and it starts to flip at all, then it's like an avalanche.
yeah.
The first people start to turn, and then everything starts to turn. But everybody wants to turn, but they don't have the stones to do it. They don't have the incentives to do it, or anything along those lines. So what I've been trying to suss out for the last couple of years, since I went on my, oh my God, is the Fed actually trying to help us get out of this thing, right? So it as a conception is, have we been seeing the little wins rack themselves up,
Yeah.
that then give more spine to the people who previously didn't have, I mean, I hate to use the word spine, because I get it, but they have the opportunity now to actually
Coefficient of
make
static
their
friction,
move and have it stick, as opposed to make their move and get fired,
or no, or end up in federal prison for them at some
end
point.
up in a ditch somewhere, or end up dead in the
Yeah, no,
ditch, or poisoned, or whatever.
I'm with.
They're right.
Sorry, no,
So
I'm with Tom. I don't think it's some like it's now we're stepping out to do the right thing. I think it's probably it's like when like the Soviets would be like, how do you have your free market do this? And be like, because everyone's just looking out for themselves. And it comes across as like the best planned economy ever. No, the reality is like, no, everyone just wants a new car and a pool. And so it comes across as innovation. And it's like, no, it's just everyone's like, it's the same thing. I think a lot of people are seeing their star in the ascendant, and they're seeing a lot of people who are just gaining flack, and they're going, no, they're like, yeah, more and more leaks.
Think of it this way. Think of the reverberations of a monumental event like getting rid of the Speaker of the House. It was a monumental event. Now, Mike Johnson himself might still be a compromised figure, might still not have all the power that you would hope we would want him to have to do the right thing, but he's in a better position than he was before, and then that inspires other people down the bureaucratic pyramid to filter. Now he knows. Now people know that there's a path for this report that's been sitting on my desk for fucking
Yeah.
4 years about this bullshit. Now it can actually go up the chain of command. Like,
Yeah.
it's a slow process because everybody has to perceive the wins. And I've used this example before. When Putin moved into Syria in 2015, right? Everybody was like, up to that moment, everybody was cowed. Saudi Arabia, the Arab states, this one, everybody was cowed because no one wanted to go against the United States. Putin stands up, goes against the United States, blows open all the narratives about Obama and about ISIS and Assad and all of this shit. And what did that do? I wrote this then when I was writing for Newsmax. So this was before I went quote unquote public, but I wrote this in my newsletter then. I said, this gives spine to the spineless and voice to the voiceless. This is going to be the most monumental geopolitical event of the century, because it's going to start the avalanche against the current colonial system. It's going to start to unravel if Putin and Russia are successful in stabilizing Assad. Here we are a decade later, and look at where we are. Or 8 years later, and look at where we are. So it's the same kind of thing. You're just seeing the reverberations, the ripples in the ponds from all of these events. So go ahead.
So we've got this New York Times story coming out today, kind of blowing the CIA's cover for their sinister and surreptitious program in Ukraine. Okay. What do you suppose? This would seem to be a very disordering event for the blob, for the Intel blob. What do you imagine is going on inside the Intel blob right now?
Could be a limited hangout.
Could be.
You're going, oh, let's tell them about the 12. So we go, these fuckers, they're doing everything. It's like,
40.
just do not let them know about the other 18 in Taiwan. They're just going,
Yeah.
give them this.
Well, we already had the bioweapon lab thing going on for the last 3 years. The reports of many bioweapons labs in Ukraine. So
maybe that was a limited hangout, and now they're fucking taking one more tactical retreat. They're going, give them the 12.
But they're not in a position where the public sentiment about continuing the Ukraine project is secure enough for them to let many of these things just casually hang out.
So therefore, this has to be, I would say that
I think it's a counterfaction.
That this is more evidence of someone has now rolled, and we don't hear it publicly, and we're in a different state of affairs than we have been previously, or at least it suggests strongly that that may be a possibility. Let's just wrap it in, circumstantial evidentiary language.
Well, let's use historical precedents, and then I'll take a piss. But it's in Annie Jacobson's book Operation Paperclip, and it's a fantastic book about Operation Paperclip. But I always think it's fascinating because we're looking at it backwards in time, where we all know exactly what happened. So you start hearing stories about what the Nazis were doing in 43 and 44, and you're like, yeah, and then in 45 they lost. But there was a time when it wasn't in 1945 they lose. It was just the future was as much as an event horizon as we are right now on February 26, 2024. These guys who they weren't just normal Nazis. I mean, the highest guys up. I mean, Arthur Rudolph, Werner von Braun, all these guys who were fucking Hitler's right-hand men. And they, just yes, sir. And we're full speed ahead in the V2 rocket, and we're building all this shit in Nordhausen, and the V3 will go higher, and blah, blah, and they're doing all of this. And they were also taking blueprints, copies of what they knew to be the most valuable parts, gyroscopic, navigation. And they were taking them out and like a fucking cartoon, they're putting them in crates and burying them on their properties. And two of them would be like, hey, if things go south, maybe we should have a contingency plan. And they'd be like, well, I can get these blueprints. And the other, so Jim would say to Tom, oh, I can get these. And Tom would go, well, I can get these. And then within that little group of two, they would also they're like, in just in case he turns on me, I got another crate of, I don't know, the fins of the V2. And they would leave him out there. But at the time, it's 1943. It's the unstoppable German machine. Yes, mein Führer, we're going to keep going. And as you're getting closer and closer and closer to the end, you finally have where, Werner von Braun came down and he was like, he came down from his little fucking hideout in the mountains and he was like, he sent his brother down on a bike and he was like, tell them I would like to talk to Ike. It was just a bunch of Marines like, what the fuck? And then, they find out it's Werner and they goes back to headquarters and they're like, flag him, arrest him right there. And he's like, they're like, why, basically, like, why shouldn't we give you to the Soviets? And he's like, well, if you come to my property, I think I have something you might like. So the OSS goes and they're like, no, we would like that. And then, he's like, sorry, like Hans, Hans is like, hey, don't worry, I had to create on my thing. And they're just both it's very real politic where they're like, yeah, I mean, Hitler's fucking dead, dude. What, you want to die or do you want to go to America? And it's like, it's very real. The gun's to your head. You're going, fuck it, we're going to America, whatever. What do I give a shit?
Right.
But we know that in hindsight now. We know all the dates and we go, of course they're doing. But at the time, you got to think of how insane that's treason. That's shot in the head by Hitler himself if you're putting crates. But and if the Nazis won, you'd never hear about the crates. They'd slowly go find them, get rid of them. How many crates are being buried in a very monolithic thing right now? I would never leak that, sir. I would And then in 80 years, they're like, yeah, so of course, leaker this and leaker that, who we now know as X, Y, and Z. Yeah, they were the ones that were leaking this video and that video because they were putting their thumb in the air. They're looking their finger going, tides are changing, man. Tides are fucking changing. Hey, how married to this are you really? Or do you want to just, hey, get rid of the swastika, the American flag, it's red enough, and we're going to America. What the fuck do you care? Yeah, they're going to give us our own place out in the desert. And hey, Werner, you're going to fucking take pictures, you and JFK hanging out. You, JFK, and Curtis LeMay. Yeah, what do I give a fuck? Give me the Ray-Bans, like red, white, and blue, baby. They don't give a fuck. It's very real politic. And guess what?
Right.
If you don't come with us, you're going with the Soviets. And it's not as good, man. It's not as good. So you come here, you fucking put a fucking man on the moon, and you're a goddamn hero. Werner von Braun hosted his own Disney show. Like, this is insane. Motherfucker just said, I don't give a shit. Fuck this shit. How many of those things are happening? And you'll never hear about it. Because if you do, you get raided by the SWAT team, by FBI, and you're in fucking Guantanamo for the rest of your life. Until enough cracks start happening, inflection point comes, and all of a sudden you're going, yeah, I got. What do you want, docs on? This lawyer, this senator, I got everything. What do you want? Don't prosecute me. I want to be on the new team. That's what I think's happening.
And in politics in Washington D.C., none of these people have any fucking morals.
That's not.
A couple of them are true believers, but most of them are just cynical fucking operators.
Yeah, a couple of them are gonna die in the bunker. The rest are gonna get out.
Right.
Everyone else is gonna get out.
And everybody else is gonna be like, yeah, I'm good with the gold watch.
Yeah.
And witness protection. I'm good.
Yeah. No, I was never the interviews with these Nazis, dude. They were in a fucking mansion in the UK. It was called Ashcan, and it was no one knew about it. And it was just all these Nazis, these top guys. I think there's 13 of them in this mansion. They're all divas. They all wanted their own mansions. And the interrogators found out that the guys, they all liked fucking. They didn't even have to press them. They're like they just like gossiping about each other. So they'd bring them in one by one. These Nazis would come in, like, yeah, go and talk to America. And they would sit down and be like, listen, I was forced to do this. These other guys, they're fucking Nazis. If they would leave, and the next guy would come in and be like, listen, I'm Dieter. I was forced to do this shit. I want to come to him. I think Manhattan's beautiful. These other guys, they're fucking not. And we took them all and we brought them all back. And we're like, they all want to fucking, what do you think? They're Nazis. They're spineless. Like, are you surprised? No, they're all fucking. We brought them all back, and they all lied to each other. Like, yeah, I'd never turn you in, brother. We bugged like the picnic tables where they're hanging out. They're like, yeah, but if you have to stick together, yeah. And then they go into the interrogation rooms and be like, he's a Nazi, he's a Nazi. Like, they would all say this shit, and we just took them all back. That's you think Washington D.C. They're like a bunch of. There's a couple true believers who will blow their brains out.
Well, we're not talking about two adversarial cultures and countries. We're talking about our country and the people within our country, and that's a big difference.
And that's actually going to lower the threshold, Jim, for people to actually be willing to do the right thing.
Yeah, because there is such a thing as loving your country and being patriotic and all that stuff.
Some colonel being like, hey, yeah, we have this the secret NSA program where we were, watching our own people from 1980 forward. Did you do this, that, and the other thing? Like, yeah. Are you willing to like hang out, put all these guys?
But it is so weird. the way all of these things are converging, and it seems like January of 2025 would be an awful long time to wait for a lot of this stuff to resolve. And there's a lot of opportunity for them to, for example, bump off Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I
When it
think they're,
happens, it'll happen quickly. The avalanche is
yeah.
gonna.
The avalanche is
And
going to.
Yeah.
so, in the meantime, especially apropos of how you started this discussion with the Euro war bond issue,
Mm,
an awful lot of things can happen to disorder the system,
agreed.
uh, and really badly. I mean, not just a little. Like this whole idea of provoking a larger war in Ukraine. It's a really short hop between crossing a red line with Russia and having them just say, "Fuck it, we're going to lob a bunch of hypersonic nukes into New York, Washington, Los Angeles, Chicago." I mean, there's not going to be any middle ground there where we're not going to slog out a European land war against Russia with American troops and American arms. I mean, that's one of the reasons this whole tank discussion is so comical, is because, we've demonstrated in this
Yeah.
Ukraine war that the tank is obsolete pretty much.
Yeah.
Mm,
It's not really a viable weapon at this point.
Yeah. They knocked down an
And nor
Abrams.
are large troop formations really.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, there's
So
that. There's that
that's all really off the table. So what's next? Well, we're going to poke this bear, with a stick, and the bear's going to lob a bunch of nukes over, and that's going to be the Deagle population forecast for you.
Well,
Or
it's funny, guys. You're describing this, Jim, and every time I hear that um, description, I'm dead serious when I say all I can think of is I go back to the 1950s and I think of Philip K. Dick when writing about the wars, some of the stories he wrote about the endless warfare, and the stories like Second Variety, where you know, yeah, like the traditional armies are obsolete. It's all drones and infiltration and mines and this and it's all ever more esoteric and uh, um
Technological.
subtle versions of warfare, just as deadly, even more deadly.
Yeah.
So that you wind up with this, and you wind up with these in these moments. As be honest with you, like Second Variety is a brilliant story, and it was made into a cheap Canadian science fiction movie with Peter Weller called Screamers. But literally, other than the really bad special effects, holy shit, was that movie like telling you what Ukraine and Russia is gonna look like? And it is, where they're back to trench warfare,
Which one was that?
active mines, and the whole 9 yards. What's that?
Which movie was that?
It's an old movie called Screamers. It's built.
Oh.
It's based on Second Variety. Not a very good movie. Well,
Because there was a
outside of
Canadian,
the special effects, it's actually not a bad movie.
there was a Canadian one done by Cronenberg, his first movie, uh, and it was about people's heads exploding.
Oh, that's Scanners.
Right, because a friend of mine,
That's a different. That's a different.
friend
That's
of
a
mine who
different one.
lives
That's
here,
another issue. That's another issue as well. But
a friend of mine who lives here was the star of that, and
interesting.
and he was a Canadian painter. He was just an artist
Hmm.
who from Montreal, who knew Cronenberg, and Cronenberg cast him in this low budget movie, and
Yep.
he lives about 5 miles away from here, but he doesn't
Cool.
do movies anymore.
No, he was, and he is the weak point in that movie.
Yeah.
He's not an actor. It's really clear.
Yeah.
But Scanners is a great movie. I just watched it recently, actually, as a matter of fact. That's it. That being said,
So
but
Philip
no,
K. Dick.
the story about the part about Second Variety was that the robots got more and more and more and more sophisticated, and in order to infiltrate the other lines, because this conventional warfare was dead. There was no troop formations. There were no tanks. It wasn't even about territory at that point. It was just about at that point it was just endless war, and
Yeah.
and Dick was a master at taking these things to their insane conclusions. But now we're seeing them play out today. So now that we found our first real war since since Vietnam, and what do we have? The Russians go in with troop formations and tanks, and they lose them all, and then they have to completely change their tactics. And now look at what they've got: small combined arms with drone support and artillery support, and we're back to that. And then you wear the other, you wear the opposition down, and you attrition them off, and then you either do it or you don't. And if you attrition them off, then you get to move forward. And now they're in the moment now where they have the run of the center of the country, and they should. I mean, I want the war over. I want the people to stop dying. I want and all of that. But from a purely strategic perspective, I'm like, if I'm Putin, I'm going to push, because every 5 square miles that I take east of west of Avdiivka is another 5 square miles worth of leverage that I have over the West.
Yeah.
I mean, think back to the Cuban Missile Crisis, and again, it's something that like we look back on now and we know everything. But think of how insane that was, like the height of nuclear brinksmanship, and we now know that Bobby Kennedy was like writing handwritten notes and giving it to a courier on a bike, just some kid who was like, man, I hope this kid just like doesn't stop and see. I think he said that in his journal. He's like, I hope this kid doesn't go see his girlfriend. Like he has no idea that I'm like writing to like Khrushchev, because they're both playing this weird game where Kennedy's kind of saying like, I don't think Khrushchev's in charge, and Khrushchev's kind of saying like, I think it might be the generals, and they're playing this weird fucking game. That's the Cuban Missile Crisis, like the highest level. There's the game going on, and like we now know. So what Jim was saying is, so what's gonna happen? We just keep poking and poking and poking until the bear throws some nukes, or again, Occam's razor. You probably have a group that's watching, and then they'll go and like back channel. Hey, Putin, we don't want this either. Like we'll hang them out to dry. They don't, because Putin doesn't want to launch this, and no one wants it. It's the end. Occam's razor would say, let's get the people that are trying to say that they want, because like listen to the tapes now. Kennedy was recording LeMay, and I think Curtis LeMay goes, Mr. Kennedy, you've got yourself in quite a fix. And Kennedy turns and looks at him and goes, you're right here with me. But like they didn't know they're being recorded. He was like, where the fuck do you, like Secretary of the Air Force, like you're dead too. We're all dead. We're vaporized. But I mean, like we now know in hindsight, it's like, no, it's not a monolith. Like there are little cracks and shit. I think it would say, like, now granted, they then blew off Kennedy's head and Bobby, so maybe this is not the best example, but, you don't even have group cohesion at that highest level. So to me, it makes sense that if this group exists, they're probably watching this and they're going, it's all the more reason to, it's just painting them as the even worse guys.
Well, so much of this seems to hinge on Ukraine serving as the money laundry for
no, that's just wrong place,
US.
wrong time. That's I mean, that's the most unfortunate thing is like those people are just, they are the pawns of pawns of pawns of pawns. It sucks. It's just a bunch of dudes.
Well, what I'm talking about is what's actually motivating the play on the game board.
Yeah, no, and it's just what I'm saying is like I just feel
attempt to get another, this attempt to get another X amount of billions of dollars through the money laundry and circulating back into Raytheon and Boeing and
no,
McDonald's.
It's pure evil. That's fucking awful. Yeah, no, it's
no.
Yeah,
well, I mean, there's a very cynical version of this Ukraine-Russia conflict that was the very cynical version of it is that, well, we provoked this conflict. We knew that Putin would respond if we did this, this, and this. And this gives us our opportunity to empty out all the old weapon caches and get rid of all the obsolete weapon systems.
Yeah.
And hey, if we, and if we can bleed Russia white in the process, great.
Go for it.
The Russians did the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And now there are 500,000, now there's 500,000 dead friggin' Slavs.
I think.
Yeah. And guess who's cheering about that the most? And it's the part that just the glee with which I see, various members of the Anglo-American aristocracy, for lack of a better term, saying, look at how cheap this was. It didn't cost, very many American lives at all. And you got this great result. You killed all these Russians. Like the Lindsey Grahams and the David Camerons and all the rest of them. Like,
this is a great spiel.
You're literally telling the entire world how psychotic you are.
Yeah, no, it is. It isn't. You're like, this is a great deal from. You're like, what the like? You're supposed to say that in like the smoky room. They're saying on
It's
the
just
news. They're
another
like,
You're supposed
reason
to say
for
that in public.
Americans.
yeah,
It's just another reason for Americans to sign off on this whole
Right.
project.
Exactly. It's just disgusting.
And
Like,
it's just weird that the players in Washington don't notice that they
yeah.
can that they think they can get away with all this crap and that nobody's going to pay attention and want to stop it.
mhm.
I think
It's crazy. And I find you could tell the level of desperation coming into Munich. I've said this in other podcasts. I don't think I've said it to YouTube, but I've said it in other places. Like think about David Cameron, the newly resurrected David Cameron, pulled out of his coffin, you know, and jacked up on something so that he can handle the sunlight because he's a fucking vampire, and to threaten the United States with I don't know what, because we refuse to pass more aid for Ukraine. I'm like, and I my joke has been, well, what are you going to threaten us with, Dave? An 8th season of Downton Abbey? Like, fuck you. Like, who the hell do you think you are? Threatening, like, do you not understand that we don't work for you anymore? But there's this presumption, and Cameron he and a couple of others let the cat out of the bag, literally saying this. He wasn't the only British, I hate lowlight is the best way to put it, like saying these things. I'm like, fuck you. Like, what the hell's going on here? And then I really start to think about this, right?
well, somebody's got a video of him on Epstein Island.
How about all of these like fails by the British Navy, right? In recent times, right? There's these, and like the minute it starts to become obvious that everybody's starting to criticize the British over this, which again, you're not allowed. The one people you're really not allowed to criticize are the British. I get no pushback whatsoever if I criticize Germans or this one, but if I criticize the Brits, oh my God, the bots come out from everywhere to tell me that they're just a bunch of sexually repressed Monty Python freaks. I'm like, no, they're not. And they kind of still, City of London still kind of runs a lot of things, right? And then the Crown and all this. Like, so you can always tell that, by the adage that, those you're not allowed to criticize are the people that actually run things.
Yeah.
So so let's fit these naval fails by the British Navy into this context. Well, I got one of two options for you. Either this is yet another lame attempt to prove that, look, the Brits couldn't possibly be in charge of anything because look, they can't even like put a boat in the water at this point. Or you have quiet quitting by British naval officers who are like, yeah, fuck a whole lot of this nonsense. And we're going to sabotage our own freaking boats in order to stop these people from trying to create a false flag by sending the British aircraft carrier out into the ocean for the Russians to sink. Because, it's not like they didn't do this shit with the fucking Lusitania or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, there, I said it.
Yeah.
Like that.
That is
more than
kinda,
100 years ago.
that is kind of fucking with it though, right? Is like in the age of like audiobooks and Google, you do have a bunch of soldiers probably just on downtime just reading. They're like, "The fuck is the USS Liberty?" Like they're just looking at it going, "What?" Like, huh? Like, hey, fuck. I one of the guys I've interviewed a lot, Clay Martin, former Special Forces guy, is he was like he wrote like a fictional book about it's like a revolution, but it starts with like, yeah, no, it's like just soldiers passing around books. Like, you ever heard about Smedley Butler? And it's like it's supposed to be 50 years in the future. And it's like it's all banned. And it's like passing around Marines. And it's like, yeah, no, I heard Eisenhower was like a transphobe. And they're like, well, this is why they don't like him. And it's like the speech. And like, the fuck? It's all about profits. And it's like it's harder and harder to keep the charade going. Right? It's like, yeah, we're pushing this ship out here. And it's like, I ain't fucking doing that, man.
All right. Well, speaking of
Fuck right off.
charades, I'm a little bit kind of troubled, puzzled by the Euro bond idea, war bond idea, because all of these events seem to be moving far too quickly for them to be able to make that happen or get it together in any time for it to be a plausible operation. So how can that be?
Well, I mean, again, like I said, I just think these people are project managers. I don't think they're actually, I think they're IQ 105 midwits who were just smart enough to run the machines, but not smart enough to understand how it operates.
And who
And
do
so
they
they just,
imagine is going to buy these Euro bonds, these war bonds?
well, they sold the first couple $100 billion when they issued the Sure bonds under COVID, and then they lost 45 fucking percent.
Uh-huh.
Now, yeah, who are they going to sell those to? Like
Yeah.
the other member central banks, of course, who are then going to be, that's what who bought them the first time. Like the goal here is like, look, this is just the tip at the end of the day. No, it's just the tip. You know what I mean? Like that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to do this by degrees. And the thing that you should really be interested in is what Bruno Le Maire said the other day, the Belgian finance minister. He's out there on Twitter and he's lamenting. He's like, "What the fuck is going on? This is my data point for why these people are nothing but project managers." He comes out and he goes, "What the fuck is going on here? We were supposed to have already stolen the $35 trillion of the savings of the continent of Europe and, and appropriated it to fight climate change. I thought that was already supposed to happen by now. What's going on here?" Like, dude, you're not supposed to say that out loud. Like this whole great taking thing, I've been arguing since July when the book came out last year. I'm like, oh yeah, they're going to do that in Europe. Like Bruno Le Maire just literally told you that's what the plan is. And then he's mad that it hasn't happened yet because it was supposed to already have happened by now. But it's not going to happen here in the United States. Like this is the thing, and so it's always been a gaslighting process. That's part of, and whether I'm not accusing the author of the book of being an agent.
David Webb.
Yeah, David Webb. I'm not accusing him of anything. He might have. I've met people who know him personally and whatnot, and he's probably just an honest broker. But his book is being used, being purposefully amplified. So
but, I don't see anything really left standing in Europe. A year from now, they're stuck with this absolutely destabilizing immigrant problem that is only going to get worse and worse. I mean, if you look at the UK, it's like the UK hardly even exists anymore as a culture within that nation. And if you're a nation that no longer has a culture, identifiable culture, there's not much really left for you to do but fall into some kind of turmoil and failure. And it looks like France and Germany are not far behind. So one of the things that I imagine is that the various important players in the EU, namely Germany and France, Olaf Scholz and Macron, their governments are going to fall in the next 12 months, I think.
I think that.
And then what happens to all these plans?
What I think is the following, Jim. I think you are absolutely right that they should fall. Will they be allowed to fall? Ooh, that's a good.
Well, they're trying their darndest in Germany to prevent even a party, an opposition party, from forming. But I don't think that doesn't look like a successful program to me. It looks like people, it looks like they're losing. It's a losing battle for them, and AFD eventually is going to, become a lot stronger, and they're going to find partners in other parties and factions who are going to want to partner up with them.
Well, in the case of German politics, I don't know if you and I have talked about this before. In the case of German politics, as of right now, nobody has any spine yet. We still have we have the Netherlands to look at as the model, which is that the cordon sanitaire around the quote unquote alt-right parties or far-right parties or whatever, the populist parties, still exists, and that then nobody will form a government with these people. There's the current Scholz government is polling around 30 to 35% total.
I think it's lower than that. I think it's lower than
it might have plummeted. I haven't looked at German polls.
It might just be Olaf Scholz's personal popularity is lower than Joe Biden's.
Yes. Scholz is below 30%, but the total of the three parties together, the Free Democrats who've fallen below the 5% threshold for representation, the Greens and the Social Democrats together poll about 30%. The CDU is now ascendant above 30%. AFD is up in the 20s. And the rest of it is just a mishmash. Look, we have the Dutch currently we have the Italians as a historical reference as to what will happen. They will not the president of Germany, just like the president of Italy, controls the process of how a new election would happen or a new caretaker government or a new coalition government would happen. So Mattarella in Italy refused to allow a new vote, right, for as long as possible in order to forestall the ascendance of a populist nominally right-wing party, right-wing government, by constantly shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic for a couple of years. That's how we got, the Democrats and M5S and, all that nonsense, right? When they got rid of Salvini in 2019. Well,
let me stop you for a second.
They'll do the same thing. What I'm saying is they'll do the same thing in Germany. Frank-Walter Steinmeier will do the same thing in Germany by taking cobbling together an SPD, CDU Green, government before they ever go to another election. They'll do that and they'll buy themselves another 6 months.
Well, what that doesn't take into account is the amount of financial damage that they may meet in the meantime. And, you start to get what's left of the bourgeoisie in Europe losing their nest eggs, their investments, their livelihoods. It's a whole different story. I want to ask you about Italy because, one of the real mysteries among many mysteries and conundrums out there is how Giorgia Meloni, is that her name, Georgia?
Yeah, Giorgia Meloni.
Giorgia Meloni gets elected on an anti-immigration platform. She's going to stop the flow in, and she's going to deport the ones that are there. And all of a sudden, there she is 2 years later, just letting this enormous stream of immigrants in, and nobody seems to object to it enough.
Yeah, no, I know Meloni is in a very difficult position, and I don't know what to make of her at this point. The evidence is very damning. That I just think that at this point, she's in a very ugly position, caught between American interests in Ukraine and European interests at the same time. She's caught between the EU and the US.
But in whose interest is it to bring tens of thousands of African immigrants into?
Oh,
Italy?
that's the EU policy, without a doubt. And she can't. And look,
it's not a policy so much as it's just another one of these planks. We keep on calling these things policies, but they're not policies. It's a joke on the people who have to suffer from it.
It's an ideology.
I agree. I've been less and less generous to Meloni's position as time has gone on, but I'm still willing to. I'm willing to see where we go, where she and where the rest of them go, in Italy. Once there's a financial crisis in Europe, okay, we're in this ugly period where this was the point I was trying to make in the article I wrote about the Eurobonds and all this, which is that in order for them to issue these things, in order for them to go for fiscal integration in Europe, they have to prove that they have everyone under control. So you have to destroy Meloni as a reformer. You have to you have to bring every weapon to bear against Viktor Orban or anybody else, because if you don't, you can't sell these things to the investors. Remember, sovereign bond yields are proportional to the amount that the investors who are going to buy them believe that the government can actually enforce the taxing policies that support the coupon payments. It's just that simple.
It just seems to me that this is exactly the kind of behavior that is going to make it more likely that these governments will be overthrown.
Agreed. Again, it's like they're in multiple Chinese finger traps. I get it. I'm not arguing with you, Jim. I'm just telling you, I'm trying to elucidate their mindset.
Well, let me ask you another.
I'm not being a strategist here. I'm trying to actually explain it from their point of view, and therefore, now whether or not it's in the practical sense, we can argue as to whether they're going to make it work. I don't think they're going to make it work.
Well, let me ask you.
Jerome Powell is going to hold interest rates at 5 to 6% and bankrupt these motherfuckers. That's what I think is going on.
Well, and Lewis Powell apparently is going to make that happen by maintaining American
Mhm.
interest rates
Mhm.
around 4 or 5%.
Even if Powell were to go back to 4%, it wouldn't save the European Union.
Hmm.
Even if Powell breaks something within the American markets, the commercial real estate market or whatever you want to call it. But I don't think he's going to. My base case now is that Powell isn't going to cut before September.
Hmm.
Okay. And I'm now at a coin flip as to whether or not he raises rates before he cuts rates.
Hmm.
If
Hmm.
inflation comes back in any meaningful way and the US employment statistics stay reasonably strong, and with the amount of money that we are still deficit spending, you're not going to get a nominal GDP negative GDP print. You're not going to get really bad employment numbers. Yes, the real numbers, not the government statistics, are worse than the government statistics. And on that point, I agree completely with Daniel DiMartino Booth, who's out there banging her shoe on the table that the data that the economy is degrading, that this is bad, blah 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 blah. I get it. I'm in agreement. All these things are a race, and all these things are, which one breaks first, who runs out of runway first for their project.
Well, let me ask you a practical problem about the European situation. You got this thing in the Netherlands where uh, Geert Wilders really basically won the last election, but he
Yes.
can't form a new government. And Mark
Right.
Rutte, who's now being considered for the leadership of NATO, is
Mhm.
running a caretaker government of some kind. How
Yes.
long can that go on? I mean, it's not can't be a permanent situation.
It'll
And
go on for
how
as
does that
long
break?
as it'll go on for as long as they needed to in order to get the bills and the rules passed that they want passed to leave Wilders in a position where he will not be able to do anything.
Uh-huh.
So if you, I've been, again, I have like the best freaking community in the world because they're on top of this. So now I got people in the Netherlands, like, and watching the news flow coming out of the Netherlands of what laws they're passing. And guess what? They're passing as many of these terrible freaking Agenda 2030 style laws as possible with this caretaker government in order to leave, Wilders with no options when he actually is allowed to form a government.
That's got
And
to be
so,
pissing off
of
the
course it is.
population of
Of course it
Holland.
is. Of course it is. And it doesn't, but they don't care. Like they really don't care. And the part of me really does believe that they're just going to collapse the whole system, issue a central bank digital currency, put money into people's wallets, deputize a whole bunch of immigrants, turn them into the new
Mhm.
gendarme, and suppress the people. But
Yeah,
again,
there's no way that that doesn't end up in some kind of a European war of all against
agreed,
all. It's really a Hobbesian outcome.
agreed, agreed. I mean, I agree, and that's why I'm like, but they don't know when to stop
Uh-huh.
because they're not smart enough to realize that they've already lost
Uh-huh.
because they're being told just keep going, as Tommy put it first, go fever.
Yeah.
We can't we
So
have to keep going forward because
keep it.
if we show weakness, then the whole thing collapses immediately,
Well, what do you
And there's no
suppose
plan
is
B.
what do you suppose
and
is
there's no plan B.
what do you suppose is preventing the European banking system from unraveling uh even now, just now, before they get
A lot
this,
of it is
you
A lot of it has been up to this point has been Janet Yellen, trying to deteriorate the American balance sheet through yield curve control. The Europeans have been buying a shitload of treasuries to maintain yield spreads. This is why I'm obsessed with watching the yield spreads between German and American debt. Been doing this for 3 years now,
uh,
or 2.5 years. So it'll be 3 years in June.
can you
And
explain, by the way, how mechanically, how does that work to stabilize the European currency and the banking system?
well, they have dollar reserves and they got plenty of trade with the United States. I mean, Europe does a lot of trade with the United States. They can
Uh-huh.
recycle those dollars into treasuries and then use those to buy them to keep because if you buy a treasury, you sell the dollar, you raise you in effect then can raise the value of the euro. The Biden administration has been doing everything to suppress the price of oil to keep inflation mostly under control globally, right? By keeping the price of
Mhm.
oil low. They've done it here in the United States. They've done it in the West. You've also got, the interplay between all of those things and the Japanese yen and the Japanese euro carry trade, yen euro carry trades, which have been unwinding slowly. It's a complex system that, at the end of the day, if what I did was to break down the Treasury International Capital Report of the U.S. by region and say, okay, who's net buyers, who's net sellers? And over the last couple of years, since Powell started tightening, China and Japan, for the most part, have been the leading sellers, and they've sold over $400 billion worth of U.S. Treasuries,
Jesus.
which should have helped raise rates even faster than what Powell raised them. Right?
Are they selling them at a loss, by the way?
Yeah, they would be selling them. Yeah, but that's what they have them for. They sell them in order to defend their currencies, right? The Chinese would be selling them in order to lighten their portfolio, so that if they do get into a war with the United States, those are fewer treasury bonds that the United States could cancel on them, which would be catastrophic, by the way, for the United States. The Japanese are doing it because it's part of their yield control program and whatnot. But the Europeans have turned out to be the ones buying all of those treasuries that were sold and more. So since September of 2021, when I started tracking all this, the Europeans have bought over $600 billion worth of U.S. treasuries. Chinese and the Japanese together sold about $400 billion, and the rest of the world has just gone with the vicissitude. They just buy and sell based on their currencies versus the dollar. It's not really all that interesting. So it's the Europeans that have been net buyers of treasuries to maintain credit spreads, and between German debt and American debt, for example. And if you can manipulate bond prices, you can manipulate everything else. So the biggest movers of the markets at this point, the sovereign bond markets at this point, are absolutely the central banks. And this would include the European member central banks, the ECB, and while at the same time the Fed is trying to shrink its balance sheet and keep interest rates high in order to recapitalize the United States, which is what's happening. Okay. And shrinking the leverage of the offshore dollar markets at the same time. So this is what's going on. It's been going on. Eventually, you can extend and pretend and keep these things running for as long as possible, as long as you still have other people's money to play with. When you run out of other people's money, that's when these kinds of price control systems collapse, to invoke Maggie Thatcher. So the question is, when is that going to happen? I don't know. I don't have a good answer for when it's going to happen. I just know that it is going to happen. It could happen next. And then the bigger question is there going to be a credit event in the United States before then, which would then force the Fed to, cut drastically and end QT and all this other stuff, and allow the European Union, allow the ECB to squirm out from underneath this? Or is Powell going to hold rates for higher and eventually force the German banks into bankruptcy? I keep hearing more and more rumors of their German banks have extreme levels of exposure to U.S. commercial real estate, which is failing.
Well, you also hear awful lot of chatter about the American banks being stuffed with bonds that are hemorrhaging value.
Right. But here's the thing. The longer this goes on, right, the more the banks get an opportunity to fix their balance sheets, because, the shit rolls off, and then, they get rid of this stuff, and slowly but surely the banks recapitalize themselves. It's happening. And that's part of what the Bank Term Funding Program was about. And now the Fed wants all the American banks to, use the discount window and to take away the stigma of using the discount window, get rid of the BTFP, and all of this stuff. All of this is going to come to a head in March, apparently, right?
That's 5 days from now, by the way.
Yeah, it's
wait, hold
soon,
on.
right? It's right around the March Federal Reserve meeting. I don't think it's going to be as catastrophic as other people in my corner of the universe, people like Lynn Alden and Groman and others who've talked about this. Oh my God, this event that's out there. I don't know. I'm like, maybe, because when I look at what's happening in, like, and I brought this up in other podcasts, So last week, I'll give you a perfect example. Last week, I go to the bank. I have to cash a couple of checks, right? And I actually go to my bank. I rarely go to my bank because it's 25 miles away. I walk into my local credit union, and last summer, when Powell first went to 5.5%, they were offering a 7-month CD special for 4.9%. Like they need they want 60 basis points. Oh, they want 60 basis points. So like Fed funds at 5.5. They're going to take my money. They're going to give me 4.9. They're going to invest at 5.5, and they're going to take 60. That same 7-month CD special is now 5.2%. Fed funds rate hasn't changed. So now they only want 30 points or 20 or 30 points. I also noted while I was in there, and I'm like, oh, cool, 5.2%, I'll buy one of those. $1,000 minimum, cool, I'll buy one. I have a little bit of money, I'll buy one. And I'm sitting there with the teller, and I look up at the quote board of the money market fund, the money market interest rates that they're paying, and the ladders based on how much you've got in the account and how much you'll get. I'm looking at what they're paying on interest-bearing checking and everything, and I notice, they're a lot better. They're a lot better than they used to be. It's not good. They're still only like offering 1%, but they're better than offering 0.5%. So what it says to me is that the bank is now in a better capital position than they were a year ago. They're still not in a good position, but since they're a credit union in North Florida, which is growing like a weed, they are improving. Their balance sheet is improving, and they can then turn around and offer more competitive rates back to their customers. And it's subtle.
But you just
it's
said
an anecdotal
North
data
Florida.
point. It's an anecdotal data point, but it's subtle.
North Florida is a booming area.
It is,
and
so
much of the United States is deteriorating very badly. And so, do you suppose that they are making money from conventional loans to things like real estate developments and things?
Yeah, absolutely, they are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's how they're recapitalizing.
That's not that, and the bonds in their portfolio that were way underwater, they have now rolled out, and they're no longer getting 0.1 or 5 or 1% on those bonds. They're getting 5% on that part of their portfolio. That's another thing. So, like, the holes in the balance sheets can repair themselves over time. It all depends on how they want to do it. And then if the people are incentivized to put money in the bank and save, then that also helps. It also gives them the opportunity to make money on net interest, on both on net interest lending and
you've got a whole nation. You got a whole nation of people and households who are just getting by on their credit cards, just borrowing more and more money.
Agreed.
So
I'm not saying this is good.
So it's hard to see where the savings are coming from on the national scale.
The savings rate is still low. The official savings rate is only 3.7%. So if you think that the Fed is going to, and here's the other thing: if you think the Fed's going back to the zero bound, they ain't doing it at 3.7% savings rate. I've got another chart on that showing you the history of QE, and every moment of QE and Operation Twist and everything else absolutely is tied to quote unquote excessive savings. Like, what a shock. The Fed's a Keynesian institution. So 3.7% savings rate, Fed's not cutting rates.
No so way. Where do you suppose the train wreck might actually come from? What's the obstacle on the train track that might derail the system then?
I think it's all the things you talked about, the potential political unrest or revolt. I think Germany's the pivot. That's why I've been saying this.
God damn it, Germany.
No, I think Germany's the pivot. It could actually be the thing that matters. We could be praising the Germans for finally standing up and saying, you know what? No, we're not doing this anymore.
Or they're going to start the
But it's going to be very difficult for the Germans to do this politically because the Greens are in charge of the upper house by virtue of the fact that they have a de facto veto over 2/3 of the German upper house, even though they have very low representation, but they have minority positions in most of the German states. And since each of the states in the Bundesrat, the German upper house, votes as a bloc, if they have one vote they effectively can hold their nose and be bitches and control 7 votes. And this has been the problem with Germany for years.
Mhm.
It just
And that's why the German elections this fall in the East German states are so important, which is why they're going after AfD, which is why you should watch the European parliamentary elections very carefully, which is why all of these things are. This is why I fully expect them, Jim, to throw the kitchen sink at no change in Germany for as
Mhm.
long as possible.
Mhm. Oh, okay. Here's something I want to throw a little, throw this in a slightly different direction.
Sure.
You know, you have this interesting drama going on in Argentina.
mhm.
And Malay is emerging as this strange counter character to everything else that's going on in the civilized world, or the Western world, anyway. You know, last week he announced that uh, the Argentine government was no longer operating at a deficit,
Mm-hmm.
that they, for the first time in, you know, generations, they have a surplus for the year. And now I suppose that he has fired thousands and thousands of civil servants. Would you imagine that?
Mm-hmm.
So he does two things over the last couple of months. He goes to Davos and basically throws down a gauntlet and spits in Davos's face, right? Tells him that you know, socialism is absurd. It's a system that doesn't work, and here's exactly why. Blah blah
Mm-hmm.
blah blah blah. Then he shows up at CPAC last week,
Mm-hmm.
gives a speech. Um, do you suppose this guy is a significant figure? And what kind of what kind of an effect is he actually having on the scene? And is it possible that he might have a more profound effect than we currently imagine?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't. I have a good. I have a partial read on him. I I think his he is a very interesting figure, and I don't have a good handle on him.
Because
Most
what
def
I'm thinking is that, you know, a lot of these people in Europe who are not in leadership but would like to be are looking at him and saying, look, they're actually making this happen in Argentina. Why are we just sitting on our asses here in Holland and Italy and Germany and France and et cetera, and allowing our countries and our culture to go down the drain? Why don't we emulate this guy?
No, it's. I think the yes, that's part of. That's going to be part of the story. My when I say I don't have a good read on Malay is like who he actually works for, who put him in power, and I
yeah.
do
Yeah.
believe that he's been pushed. He was put in power. Excuse me. Um, to defend American interests by
Mhm.
repudiating the BRICS,
Mhm.
and that he wants to. I am skeptical of what he's willing to actually put in play. Um, I God, I don't have a fully formed thesis on this, but there's a very strong interplay between Malay and Wall Street, and I think that connection is the one we should be tracing.
Mhm.
And Wall
Mhm.
Street, I think, wants access to Argentina's um, markets or their resources. I think Malay is
Yeah.
going to mobilize them,
It's a rich
and we
country
want the.
that doesn't need to be poor.
No, it's a very rich country that doesn't need to be poor. It's been, and I agreed completely. So now the bigger question is, um, you know, which part of Wall Street, which part of the American system is pulling his strings, or
Well,
is he working? Is he
Dimon,
working with? To be generous to him? Is he working with? And that's a bigger
Jamie
question.
Dimon, for example, seems to be going his own way or going in a certain direction that is maybe a little unexpected. You know, for one thing,
Absolutely,
he appears to be supporting Trump against the Biden administration,
yeah.
and you know, I would take that alone as an index that there are some interesting rogue elements in play right now.
No, Diamond has been my pivotal figure the entire time. Diamond is my proxy for the quote unquote counter-revolutionary forces within the United States.
Yeah.
He's the guy who would turn to Powell and say, no, you got to raise rates. We'll make it work. You got to raise rates. You have to break these freaking people because they want to do away with commercial banking.
Yeah.
So,
and speaking of that, by the way,
interestingly enough, while we've been talking on my Twitter feed, I was getting pinged by somebody saying, dude, are you watching Diamond on CNBC right now? I'm like, no, I can't. I'm on a call with Jim and Tommy Carrigan, and I'll watch it later. Get me a link so I can watch it. And he's like, he already gave me the link. And I'm like, it's like 8 minutes of him on CNBC. He's like, it's really interesting. You're going to want to watch this. I'm like,
wow.
Oh, fuck, and because when Diamond speaks, it's always really important. My point being is that
U.S. policy, really.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, Jamie Dimon's been Secretary of State the real Shadow Secretary of State for the last fucking year and a half.
Yeah.
Like, he goes to China, he goes here, he goes there, he goes to Davos, he spits in their face. I mean, if anybody spit in Davos's face, it wasn't Millet. It was Jamie Dimon.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how it's almost like a form of like it's almost like a form of like what am I looking for? Not crypto. The fuck what word am I looking for? Like classified like messages.
Yeah. Encrypted,
not crypto. Encrypted. It almost is like a weird form of like elite encryption. You know, president talks, no one gives a fuck, and it's like Diamond's giving a speech, like the dad's like turn it on, like, and it's just like, yeah, it's like this is like this is what we're doing.
This is policy. This is the policy.
He's like, Argentina is the burgeoning. It's like, all right, fuck, all right, move all of the assets to here. Sorry.
By the way, there seems to be some kind of movement also in Brazil among Bolsonaro's network. They seem to be stirring. Lula, the president of Brazil, has been threatening to Trumpify Bolsonaro in exactly the same way that they did to Trump, because they had a kind of a J6 type incident down there after Lula's election, and now they're going to try to J6 Bolsonaro, but they're getting quite a bit of pushback now. And I wonder, things are stirring out there in an interesting way.
Yeah, so Lula's an interesting figure, right? And I'll for this reason and this reason alone. The BRICS. We no longer have OPEC. We had OPEC Plus. We added Russia. Now we have BROPEC because we added Brazil under Lula to OPEC. Lula has made it abundantly clear. I was looking at Petrobras and the situation surrounding Petrobras, and was shocked. But Lula's like, "Oh, we're not going to shut down oil production. No. We're going to do the exact opposite. We're going to expand oil production over the next 10 years by 50%. We're going to make sure that there's money that Petrobras is reformed to stop trying to put out to rest on its laurels and pay American investors 16%, but to up production and put money into exploration. Like Petrobras has got a massive like $100 billion exploration project, the scheme that they're going to implement over the next 5-7 years to up production, which is already at a record level for Brazil from 3.7 million barrels a day to 5.5. Like Lula's like, we're going to be the last oil producing country standing when we move to the post hydrocarbon economy, which is another way of saying we're never getting rid of hydrocarbons. Which is another way of saying, I smoked the Jamie fucking Dimon. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? And Lula was supposed to be the Davos guy that destroyed Brazil. I'm like, AMLO was supposed to be that guy in Mexico too. Huh. Yeah. So, again, Bolsonaro is I don't have a good read on this whole situation with him. Like, I don't know Brazilian politics well enough to make a statement beyond what I just said.
Well, it's a developing story. I think we'll know quite a bit more in the weeks ahead.
Agreed, but I don't know any of the further nuance to this. What I can say is Petrobras is probably where to look ultimately on what's happening in Brazilian politics. And with that said, I have to pull Tommy Carrigan and go pee. I'll be back in a couple
shit
minutes.
Your pants. Jim, I was going to ask you about deindustrialization. Is there like a is there a, so I'm reading this book right now, like the formation of zeppelins and airships in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and it's just interesting the facts and figures they pull out are tracking horsepower used by internal combustion engines in Britain, and like they use that as a metric. And it's kind of interesting. It cuts through all the horse shit, and it's like in 1876 there was like only like 5,000 horsepower produced that year using internal combustion engine. Then by 1906, it had ballooned to like 4 million. In terms of the general like deindustrialization that you've talked about, like we've been living high in the hog for a while.
Mhm.
Is there a way to like track general energy production? Because it seems like, and then to pivot from there, another book I just read called Firepower. I'm having on the author later this week. And they're talking about all like the capital battleships between World War One and World War Two. And there are all these treaties, and everyone's like, all right, you can only be this much tonnage, only this much draft, you can only displace this much water, the guns can't be any bigger than this. But kind of like the Nazi thing, they all had plans on the boards. And as soon as like negotiations went south, everyone just started building. They had all the schematics ready. And it was just like, yeah, it's all horseshit, kind of what you're just talking about, like, like the shutting down oil production. Like, no, we're gonna boost it up. Is there a general way to track how much of this is just posturing? And are we gonna see, like, as negotiations or as alliances break down and formed, is it just gonna dial right back up again?
Well, there's certainly very easily obtainable metrics for global oil production country by country and
Yeah.
region by region. We know it, we know pretty much in the USA, especially exactly, how much we're producing, what kind it is, what grade it is, where it's going, et cetera, et cetera. But it's unfortunately the numbers hardly tell the whole story. For example, I interviewed a well-known oil expert named Art Berman on my last podcast. It's the one that's still up, and he was being pretty cagey. I was a little hard to pin him down. But the basic story is that American oil production is at an all-time high now. It's over 13 million barrels a day. And that's way above the old, 9.9 plus million barrels a day that we were at in 1970, which was the former peak. And the trouble is that it doesn't tell the whole story. We're producing a shitload of oil out of the Permian oil basin, but the other two main ones, the Bakken region in Dakota and the Eagle Ford in a different part of Texas, those are in decline. And so you're really only left with this one oil region, and there are only so many sweet spots, so-called, that they can exploit. And if they happen to be at an all-time peak now, my inference would be that they have exploited as many sweet spots probably as possible, and that we're going to see quite a decline, and it'll be shockingly rapid because you never go down the other side of the bell curve
Yeah.
as symmetrically as you went up. It's much more of what they call a Seneca cliff.
Hmm.
And so, the hidden story is, how quickly is the Permian Basin in the US going to enter depletion? Um, what kind of exploration have we been doing that has proven any positive results over the last several years? I think the answer is almost nothing. And how steep is that decline, and how quickly is that decline going to happen? I would imagine that decline is going to be fairly soon and pretty darn quick. So
Uh, you,
in short, we're at a place now where everybody feels fat and sassy, and yet the picture is actually rather ominous behind those numbers.
well, the bigger question is not just that. I mean, the bigger problem for us is that we don't actually like the oil that we produce. That's the
Because
bigger
it's so
problem.
light, you mean?
Yeah, the stuff that we produce, we're not a big fan of. Like our economy is, and our
It's not enough, doesn't
distribution
have
system,
enough diesel, and it doesn't have enough aviation
our
fuel.
refineries are designed around different grades of oil.
Yeah.
That's why the you know, so a lot of that stuff that we're producing is designed for the export markets.
Yeah,
Right.
and in fact, there's a great deal of swapping around because we need to import heavier grades of oil to mix with our extremely light grades. You know, some of
Yeah,
this,
no, that's why during all of this, like when Trump, cut off Venezuela, we had to start buying Russian oil.
yeah, because
We were buying
Venezuelan
shit
crude was
tons of
very
Urals
heavy.
grade oil from the Russians because it was the only stuff heavy enough to for our refineries on the Gulf Coast to deal, which are all designed to deal with the tar sludge that comes out of Venezuela.
Yeah.
So, and so there's you and I are on the other side, are on opposite sides of the peak oil discussion. I'm relatively speaking, I am not a peak oil guy at all. I don't believe that. I believe the world is awash in oil. There's plenty of oil out there. At what price is always the interesting part, always the interesting thing. And when you inflation adjust oil prices, they're not really that much higher than they were in the 1970s. And that's using the CPI, which is radically understated, to inflation adjust the price of oil.
Well, it doesn't even include the price of energy, does it? The CPI calculation.
Yeah, it does.
Or is that the
It just
GDP?
absolutely like suppresses it in every way, in every way.
Yeah.
But the CPI is it looks at gasoline prices,
Mm.
and gasoline prices are downstream of oil prices. So, they've been manipulating, by the way, the price of gasoline, RBOB gasoline futures, by the way, as well. And then that we start getting into the RINs discussions about corn, the price that they have to pay in order to blend in corn and this and that and all the other shit. It's none of these are real markets. They are all government managed markets. They are all government managed prices. And so what you do in order to try and cut through all the noise, this is the way I've come to to analyze these markets, is that you look at the levels that they are trying to defend, and then you ask yourself, are they successful in defending the level? And that level currently is $80 a barrel. Okay. Brent crude, I don't give a fuck about WTI, because no one gives a shit about WTI. West Texas Intermediate. It's all about Brent because 85% of the oil in the world is priced relative to Brent. Or at least 80%. Maybe some of it is being priced versus Dubai now. So and soon Shanghai is going to be in that mix as well. But Brent crude, they clearly have been targeting $80 a barrel, and they can't hold it below 80. And, part of the reason why I do the technical analysis of the markets is to try and figure out when they're manipulating the price to bang the close, or to, I know how they manipulate markets, to manipulate perception, to move the Overton window, to get traders to position themselves in a particular way. It's everywhere. Okay, it's all over these markets, and the oil market absolutely is the thing that they have targeted since the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war. They wanted $60 a barrel Brent. They couldn't get it. They couldn't get below $75.
There's another element in the story, though, that I think is being overlooked, and that is how much the distribution routes globally are being destabilized.
Very big fucking thing.
Houthis.
Huge.
Because if you can't move the tankers through the Suez Canal through the Persian Gulf, no, the Red Sea, excuse me, the Red Sea.
Red Sea.
If you can't use that transport route, that really severely disrupts a lot of the global oil trade.
Yeah, no,
especially to Asia.
I wrote a piece about this a while ago, and I was talking about this when the Houthis first started attacking ships in the Red Sea, and when the first company said, "Well, we're moving the stuff around the Cape of Good Horn."
Yeah,
to get to Asia, and I'm part of an email group of a bunch of financial professionals and commentators, and one guy did a quick back of the envelope calculation, and it's in my article that I wrote about this, which is that if you divert 50% of the oil that normally moves through the Suez Canal, and you add that cost in days to the trips these ships have to make. Remember, Oil tankers burn crude oil.
Yeah.
They burn number 6 bunker fuel, which is basically dewatered, de-soil. I mean, it's basically just
Cleaned
number
up
6.
crude oil.
It's just crude oil that's been passed through a filter and the water and the water siphoned off the top. That's it, and separated from the water that separates out. That's it, right? And so they burn crude oil. So the back of the envelope calculation was if you take 50% of the Suez Canal traffic, then the ships themselves have to burn an extra 500,000 barrels a day just to move the existing to move that around. It's not a trivial amount of oil. What's that?
500,000 barrels.
500,000 barrels a day.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely the marginal. Remember, oil prices are set at the margin. They're not set the 95 million barrels, the 93 other million barrels a day that we burned. Those don't matter. What matters is the last one, because prices in a free market are set at the margin. You move that set point 500,000 barrels a day, you change the dynamic completely. And so now the oil markets themselves, the oil distribution markets, are less efficient. Saw something over the weekend, and I can see it in tanker day rates, and I can see it in Suezmax and Panamax, and all the day rates on all of the shipping industry. They're all rising, all the way around the board. There aren't enough freaking oil tankers to then offset the now you've screwed up. Not only have you added days, but now you don't have enough oil tankers to move them oil that's demanded around, because you need more oil tankers because you're not moving the same, because more of them are because they spend more time at sea.
Yeah, the journey is a longer journey.
Now you need 10% more oil tankers, and you don't have, and there's no infrastructure to build them, and we're at 5-6%. Oops. Like, this is why this is such, I mean, like, dude, I look at this and I'm like, oh, it was such a brilliant freaking thing. Activate the Houthis with their missiles in there. I'm like, boom, done. Oil is never going back to $60 a barrel. Done. Oil should be at 100. They're holding it down below 80 in order to try and keep the European Union from melting down. I'm dead serious. Dead serious. Because we can afford $85 a barrel oil here in the United States. They cannot afford. They either have to let the euro go to $112, or you get oil prices down to thing. You can. So anyone I watch for every day, I watch for the days when the euro goes down and oil goes up, as opposed to them moving in tandem together. Like when oil goes up, the euro goes up. When oil goes down, the euro goes down. When they go in opposite directions, I'm like, ooh, that's a bad day. That's a day where somebody's going to go bankrupt. That's a day when somebody's interest rate swap is, derivative is going to blow up on them, and then somebody's going to have to be scrambling behind the scenes to pump liquidity into some Austrian bank or whatever.
See, but this is kind of what gets my focus. There's a great book called Base Nation by David Vine. He's professor, I think Georgetown. I've had him on here. It's a fantastic book. It's about all the U.S. bases around the world and just kind of the network of it. And the way it's described is, I mean, just kind of transcending administrations, it's currency printing. It's like there's almost something refreshing about it in that it's just so real. It's not fake about bots and polling data and who's leading this many super delegates and we're printing this much. It's just like cold, hard, like, where's the food coming from? Where's the water coming from? Where's the ammunition coming from? And most importantly, where's all the fuel coming from? Because the DOD burns more fuel than like almost every nation. It's fucking insane. When there's a pressure point on that, that's the same as fucking with the mafia's money. Meaning that if it's happening for whatever reason, they're letting it happen, or they're aware of it and they're getting ready, and the only reason your head hasn't been blown off yet is because someone's not calling it. So that's kind of what gets me more than everything. Is like fuck the polls, fuck elections, fuck printing. Money's fake. It's all ones. None of it's real. When you're fucking with the DODs, like when you're fucking with their supply, you're fucking with their crack, that's when I'm like, that's when I start to get I'm like, that's where my stomach starts turning. I'm like, oh yeah, no, this is like the very real. You don't turn off the faucet of the death machine. Everyone that does, you get some freedom, or you get some, grassy knoll, whatever you want, whatever analogy you want.
And by the way, that death machine you're talking about runs on diesel and aviation fuel, not on
Right.
gasoline.
They
And if we don't,
will,
and if we're
Mm.
not getting that imported heavy oil, then they're not going to be getting the kind of fuel that they need to
and
run
there,
that machine.
and there's, I'm sure that there's some fucking checklist somewhere about all the different soft power ways we can tighten the money supply of this, and we can do that. And, farther down the list, it's like, if you need, you can do a false flag here or all the way down to straight up just like, yeah, we'll just knock over their borders. Fuck them. That's what, and I think we're getting like farther and farther down the list of like what we need, like the naked face of power. It's kind of fascinating. I mean, it's horrifying, but it
Mm.
is kind of fascinating. You are just kind of seeing the naked face, like the guy. Like, this is a great deal. Americans are getting the Raytheons putting. Do you know how many people we're vaporizing and turning into hamburger meat? This is a great deal. And you're like, what the fuck? Like, but I think we're seeing like the naked face of power, and I
Hmm.
mean, I don't know. It's horrifying, but it's fascinating. I don't really have a
Yeah.
point in there. I just
I mean,
observation.
look, there's you everything runs on oil, right? Oil is the collateral for the entire financial system, not just, and then the enforcement of the financial system is
Is
through the military, which you just laid out,
you're
Tommy.
fucking hitman. Yeah, what do they run
Right.
on?
So, at the end of the day, yeah, this is attacking the global supply of oil, and the Russians are not stupid, and the Iranians are not stupid, and they're gonna go, okay, well, what are you willing to do to, um, what are you willing to do? Well, clearly we have an asymmetric thing that we can do here. We can take Fremen in Yemen, and we can give them drones, and we can give them missiles, and hide them in the mountains, and eventually activate them to go after shipping. And that changes everybody's calculus. And I'll tell you, who actually is targeted by this directly, and why they're screaming so goddamn hard? City of London.
Oh,
Who is the biggest insurer of maritime trade in the world? How does the UK actually make any fucking money? That's what this is all about, folks. And when they cut Iran out of the SWIFT system, and they said Iran's not gonna, and everybody said, oh, we won't give them insurance, their tankers insurance, which the Brits did. Or what did the Iranians do? They sailed ships without insurance, right? Then they just developed their own insurance industry for shipping. Well, guess what the Russians are doing?
same thing.
Yeah, that's yeah. I mean, I don't know. And then lastly, in the last like 5 minutes is just a general thought I had the other day is, like the trends of population, and this probably could deserve its own podcast, but we don't need to do that now. The general, again, just kind of like fuck everything. You can remove the names, give them fictitious names, whatever. In general, countries and societies begin to collapse when the population is not replenished or growing at whatever the fuck the number is, 1.51 or whatever. Do you think there's any logic behind, like, sure, I'm sure we're running money, and I'm sure we've got a hand in the human trafficking and whatever the fuck's going on the southern border, and then you have people who it's like good for them because they get the vote. Do you think at some point there is just some like strategic planning where like Russia's population's in decline, China's is, the US's is, and there's like, what if we just add more people? Like, at some point, is there just like a sort of simplistic, there's like more people, we can't go in decline? Do you think there is just some sort of retarded like 40,000 foot view where someone at some meeting in the Pentagon for some national security
I
risk
don't
is
I
like,
don't think so in America. No, the I think the program is much more cynical
no, so
and
do I. But
more
I was just thinking
more
like maybe there is just, and it's maybe not
because
everything
the
is just
last thing we need really are, a bunch of 4'11" people who look like cookie jars.
point is just in general. Do you think there's just someone who's, like they're like, no wrong answers, no stupid answers, and someone somewhere is just like, just add more people. Can't be in decline if we have more people. It's like, all right. Then maybe there is like a simplistic, and it's retarded. It's because it's It's pure dog shit. And where I went to school, University of Georgia, some chick just got murdered by some illegal immigrant like 2 days ago, like where I used to park in the intramural fields. It's fucked up.
Mhm.
I'm not saying it's good. You,
Well,
I'm like,
The Russians are doing nothing to import foreign peoples to, replenish
is someone
their
minding the
population.
store? Is someone going like, hey, in 50 years, like this will be a problem. Like it doesn't matter. Like societies just die. It doesn't matter how on top of the world they are. They die when the population doesn't grow. It just seems to be just a law.
Well, personally, I think there are a number of reasons why the populations are declining. One of them, I think, is that it's really a harbinger of what the planet, what the planetary ecology really requires.
Yeah.
We're going to be, there's not going to really be enough resources of any kind in 50 years, as far as I'm concerned, to support the levels of population we have now. But this is combined with things like the environmental pollution problem, which seems to be affecting people's reproductive systems, and that combined with some other deliberate efforts, seemingly to destroy human reproduction in Western Civ, namely
Mhm.
the vaccines. And there's a combination of dynamics here that are very peculiar. But I think the net effect, whether you're a WEFer or whether you're a world made by hand fan, the population is going down, whether we like it or not, and we're going to be dragged kicking and screaming into a sparser future any way you look at it. So, as I like to say, one of my personal cliches is that reality has mandates of its own,
Mm.
and we're just watching those play out.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What I think.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's something to remember. It's like measurements aren't real. Like countries aren't real.
Well, not only
Money
that,
means nothing.
there's a very curious element of our techno narcissism, which is a form of a rampant quasi-religious belief system. A big element of that is the belief that if you can measure enough stuff, you can control it. And
Yeah.
so we have this mania for statistics and for, collecting so-called data, under the impression that, we'll get to some optimum level of control by doing that. And I think that that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like maybe like humanity's last gasp will just be like us seeing an asteroid, and its like point of impact will be Africa, and we'll be like, "This is a racist asteroid. It's a not progressive asteroid." As it just and it just half the speed of light just cracks this fucking planet in half, and the universe is like, "Fucking suck my balls." Like it means nothing, just nothing. Right?
Sounds like a Coen
Don't
Brothers
look up.
movie.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We'll just be like, sir, that's extremely bigoted of you, and then it just vaporizes the mantle. And you know what?
Well,
I don't know.
what I would say is never forget that once populations are put under pressure, that's when they evolve.
Yeah, well, yeah, we might be.
So,
This might be we're on the edge of a paradigm shift.
so at the end of the day, we may be, at peak fuckery, or as Jim would like to put it, or peak totalitarianism or peak tyranny or whatever it is, and that puts serious pressure on the population. And then what's that going to do? Well, it invariably it species respond by raising birth rates, by doing a lot of things in order to try and survive, because species have an imperative to continue going. And that's the historical record. That's what we see. We know that's what's going on. That we know that. So part of this is we're being demoralized into believing that we can't survive this. But we have, if you believe in if you believe in any of the solar disaster cycle shit, right? The suspicious observers, Graham Hancock, any of these guys, you realize that we're all like, we're all the 1% of 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 the 1% that survived the disasters of the last 12, 24, 36,
Yeah,
48, 60, and 72,000 years.
yeah,
Mhm.
Okay? Like, that's just reality.
Yeah.
And
And we're
like, you know, and from a population perspective, from a individual perspective, oh, this is gonna suck a lot of ass.
sure.
But you know, but you know, and we learn from every one of these events.
Yeah.
We learn from every human cycle, every historical cycle. We may make, you know, our goal, as you know, it's funny. My last story for the day, right, is this: when right after my daughter was born, my wife is talking to her mom about the things she's going to do differently with Sophie, my daughter, and in terms of the parenting and all this. And my mother-in-law was complaining that, well, you're going to spoil that child by doing attachment parenting. Am I doing this? Am I doing that? And and you know, and my mother-in-law said to her, what? So you think I was a bad mom? And because that was my mother-in-law's rampant low self-esteem rearing its ugly head. And my wife very politically looked at her and said, no, Mom, my goal is to make different mistakes. Okay.
Smart.
And with each iteration of human history, our job as storytellers, as artists, as commentators, and everything is to leave an historical record for the next group that shows up, and to teach them how to make different mistakes than the ones we did. And as long as we keep that in mind, we can keep our fucking heads, and we can tell these assholes to go, well, as Elon Musk so elegantly put it, go
fuck yourself.
Fuck yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, my closing.
That's where I am, guys.
Yeah,
that's where I am. That's where my headspace is.
No, my closing thoughts. I'm reading a book right now on like airships and shit, and the Count Ferdinand Graf von Zeppelin, and he spent his whole life fucking building these things, and he had all these. He started to go to his head in his like 80s and shit, leading up to World War I, and they're like, surely, you know, the German Empire will rule the world with our fleet of air balloons, and then like I'm just thinking like that's this whole guy's whole destiny, and he died in 1917, still thinking that like it was gonna work, like Germany was gonna take over the world using blimps. And in my mind, I'm like, I can't listen to this book because anytime I just hear his name, Von Zeppelin, I just immediately just think of like Black Dog by Led Zeppelin. I'm like, that's
exactly.
all you are. Did I take over the world? And it's like, no. But have you heard the Immigrant Song? You'd be like, what? Like that's all you. That's all. I just imagine like 150 years, someone's gonna like listen to this, and it's like we're like the COVID vaccines and the aspirin, and they're like, oh, these fucking dumb cocks. Get to the good point, yeah. Like we're gonna solve shit, or as you know, make mistakes. Eisenhower used to say, "Let's not make our mistakes in a hurry." Like we're gonna fuck it up, or we're gonna keep going, or not. I don't know. Yeah,
we're just here to make different mistakes.
Yeah,
and if you're that black pill that you think we can't get out of it, then I recommend that they still sell SPF 50,000 sunblock on Amazon. Get yourself a case of cigars, a nice big humidor, and a case of whiskey, and wait for the flash.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a smoker anymore. I was never a cigar smoker, just cigarettes back in the day.
Me too. I used to smoke cigarettes, and I stopped.
But I'm very impressed that goddamn thing lasts more than an hour, 2 hours.
This is the second one.
Oh,
the first one lasted was a 45-minute cigar. This one will last another 30 minutes. This one is. And look out, this is a small one. These are great. This is a JR alternative. These things were amazing. They're $2 a piece. They last an hour and a half.
Wow.
So they're tremendous. Like they're tremendous, and they're smooth.
I hope Dave comes in right now.
Outstanding, and they are mild.
Hey guys, I was fuck off, Dave. Get out.
Hey, I gotta go.
I did.
Yeah. Let's wrap this
Twitter
up
and invite him to the chat. He has not responded to me, but you know. I also know there's a lot going on in his life too, so you know.
CIA asset co-opted. Yeah, let's wrap this up, guys. Please go in the description. Please go follow them on Twitter. Please go follow the podcast, join their Patreon, their fucking locals, their whatever the fuck. I'm banned from all these shit now, so I don't even give a fuck. Yeah, go follow Jim and his little confetti. I don't know what the fuck that shit is. Jim's running for president. Quote: "We don't need these 4'11" cookie jars coming over the southern border." That's Jim. That's his stance, and I back it. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Till next time, as always, love talking to you guys. Guys, please go support